Hi, this is Drew Tignanelli. This is our February update here with Michael P. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing great. It's the beginning of tax season, and this is the time where we ramp up and we really get to shine.
Yeah, well, I like to think just from a personal point of view that tax season doesn't ramp up until like February 15th or 20th.
Well, you haven't been doing 1099s then,
I have not, and I don't want to do 1099s. I do tax
and
returns and I do
W-2s.
tax planning. That's what I do. Anyway, markets are higher right now, Mike.
Yep.
So people are happy. You don't get a lot of calls when the markets are going up. When markets go down, the calls start coming in as if we're supposed to predict the top and the bottom, and that just doesn't happen.
No.
I
No.
will say though that I'm afraid that short term that the Fed may be overly aggressive, and so we could get another downturn. Where you get a nice correction in this upturn that's happened, and there's so much noise. Let's put it that way, Mike. There's a lot of noise out there that people are all upset because of this, and people are all upset because of this. And if the market starts going down some because of the Fed's overtly tightening, that they're going to believe that everything that they're concerned about is now coming to fruition, and that the market's just telling you that it's coming to fruition. But what I believe you're going to see is you're going to see a downturn, probable. It's probable. I got good reason
Well,
to
there'll
believe.
always be one. We just don't know when it is.
You don't know when it's going to start. You don't know when it's going to end. And the long-term demographics and the long-term technology innovations are so dynamic that if you try to predict the top and the bottom of short-term moves, you could hurt yourself more than you could help yourself. So,
Well, and in the short term, a lot of stuff happens based on expectations of what the market wants to happen. And in the
sure.
short term, we're all focused on each of the Fed meetings, just like we've been for a couple of years now. And the one thing that you've always pointed out is that we're heading into an election year. The Fed tries to stay non-political, so if anything, it's going to tend to favor interest rates lower in a election year, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I mean, you're in an election year. So if the Fed starts to loosen, you've got the best chance that the market could respond relatively quickly to that. Now, the markets have already assumed the Fed's going to loosen. So what you could get is you could get a Fed loosening and then a market downturn for a brief period of time that concerns everyone, and then the Fed keeps loosening, and next thing you know, the market takes off for the races, and you're left behind worrying about something that was short term and artificial. So
Right.
that's the concern you have about trying to play these short term moves and trying to predict which way they're going to go and so forth.
Yeah,
So
and the yield curve, which we talk a lot about, is still inverted. Which if you listen to what we just said, like, well, what is the market expectations? Does it expect higher interest rates in the future or lower? It expects lower interest rates in the future. So the
it
inverted curve
expects,
is
that's what an inverted yield curve is. Short term rates are higher than long term. So, what the market is saying is that long term rates should be lower, but short term, the Fed is forcing them higher,
right,
and that slows the economy down. That's why the long term is saying that we're expecting rates to be lower 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road.
right,
Yeah. And an inverted yield curve also is one other thing, Mike, and that is what's the cost of money compared to the rate of inflation? And inflation now is running 3% or less.
right,
Okay. But short term, your money costs you 5%. That means you're paying 2% more than the cost of inflation. Normally, that should be almost a break even on the short end, and it should be about 1% or so higher on the long end. The long-term curve seems to be about right. The short-term end is way too high right now, at least in my opinion.
right, right.
But I don't get to vote on the Federal Reserve Board. Not yet.
Not
Not
yet.
yet.
Yeah, more to
So
work
that's
on
the
that.
key point.
Bond markets,
Bonds are very attractive.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. 4 to 8%, depending on the risk parameters. And like you said, inflation has gotten down to 3%. I think another Fed question in the air is whether or not they'll hold hard that 2% is the number, or if they'll say, well, maybe it's 2.5% now.
I think they're going to need to give it a range of like 2 to 4% maybe at the best, which is what the Fed normally had done in the past years. Between 1980 and 2000. The Fed normally was happy as long as it was in the 2 to 4% range. They were normally relatively satisfied. I think they're going to have to return to those days, even though right now Jeremy Powell and his boys are saying, and girls, don't forget there are also girls on there. You're not laughing.
No,
I am.
sorry.
You're not.
No.
You're looking at me saying, come on, Drew, get it together. But anyway,
Stay on top.
I would expect Jeremy and his team saying, no, we're going to fight it down to 2%. Well, that doesn't do us any good, because inflation is two sides of an equation. It's not only the demand side, which is the only side the Fed can affect, is the demand side. It's also a supply side. And that's where the politicians come in. But nobody seems to be explaining to the politicians that they are responsible for the supply side of the equation. And there's plenty of things they can do to affect the supply side. And one of them, Mike, is to allow significant legal immigration into this country. While people want to come to America, right now we should be inviting them by the boatloads,
Yeah.
And now not everybody's going
to.
Yeah, you're extremely low unemployment. There's tons of jobs that people coming in from lower prosperity nations would love to do. There's also plenty of jobs that people would love to do from prosperous nations in our nation, because it would be more prosperous to them here than abroad and so forth. And we're diddling around, arguing over stupid things. And it all has to do with political infighting as to what they believe their constituents want, as opposed to what the country needs, And that's what's frustrating and irritating about the two political parties in our country. But that's a whole nother story, Mike.
Yep.
And then we have the deficit, Now, a lot of people are worried about the deficit, and long term, I see it as a problem in the future. But Mike, I've been in this business for 44 years. I don't look it. That's what you were supposed to say.
That's what I was getting ready to say. It was on the tip of my tongue.
When I got in this office, into this business, Ronald Reagan had just become the president about a year after I got in. And he started to spend billions running up massive deficits to
build the military.
Rebuild the military. And people were saying, oh, this is a disaster. It's a disaster. It's a disaster. And yet it brought the Berlin Wall down 10 years later or whatever, It was necessary, and we were able to handle that deficit. Clinton comes in, 10 years later, and he runs a balanced budget, but he ran a balanced budget, Mike, based on the fact that the Social Security Administration was pulling in 300 to 400 billion surplus, getting ready for today when all the baby boomers start to retire and draw massive amounts. So they wanted to have a surplus into the Social Security Administration. So, all government has been spending massive amounts of deficit. And each one, the problem today is that it seems like it's much more out of control. In the past, Mike, when you were in good times, you would get closer to a balanced budget. When you were in bad times, you'd run big deficits.
COVID gave everybody a blank check.
Yeah, today it seems like you want to do this, you want to do this good thing here, you want to do this good thing here, you want to do that. And it's just like carte blanche. And there's a theory out there, Mike, called modern
monetary theory.
It's hard to get that off your tongue. Modern monetary theory that says the government can just spend any amount of money they want to. It shouldn't be about debt and debt payments. There should be no government debt. You just print the money, and if inflation takes off, you stop printing the money until inflation gets under control. Well,
it went okay for us. It didn't go so well for Argentina.
It didn't go well for the Weimar Republic either, because they never stopped printing the money. Venezuela, they never stopped printing the money. So I like the debt concept. It controls, it forces government to think about what they're spending. Anyway,
So speaking
we
of
got
good
to move
things, we
on.
have a lot of good content coming out, don't we?
Yes,
This
you've got a
month.
great article from our key tax guy, Justin Linthicum, in our company about 1031 exchanges and why that's important to understand and how they work. And some of the strategies as you get older, Mike, you may not want to run rental properties anymore, but how
Right.
can you get out of them and defer the taxes? And you're one of the experts in our company on that.
I have done it with a number of clients where we look at available options from the marketplace where they can diversify or not. Sometimes we can get into a single property, but sometimes we can get into multiple properties, get our income paid back to us, but defer the gain through this 1031 exchange Justin's going to be talking about in his article titled 1031 like-kind exchanges. What is it? And could this strategy be eliminated? I guess a little bit of
Yeah.
intrigue there.
There is a political party out there that if they took power totally, they would want to get rid of the concept of 1031 exchanges. And President Biden almost got that passed in 2021.
Which is
And
funny because he's
so
from Delaware.
I understand. And that, but
Delaware is where
anyway,
a lot of these investments are what is it
yeah.
called? State,
Delaware statutory trust is how you do it if you don't want to manage the property yourself anymore. It's the only way you can get out and defer the taxation is through a Delaware statutory trust.
so we have a
Anyway,
good webinar coming out also.
well, that's because yours truly is doing.
Always good when you do it. Never enough video of Drew.
I never saw a microphone and a video camera I didn't like. But
Nope.
anyway,
The
I'm
contested
talking
title of
about
that
how
is
to
last minute tax savings tips when you go to look for it on the site.
last minute tax savings tips. And I don't think it'll be out until probably mid-February though, right? It's
Yeah.
I haven't taped it yet, and I'll probably do it live also, as well as I hope to do it live as well as have it available for people to watch, but we'll see. It just depends on what time I have and what time the company has. Sometimes I have to just tape it and sometimes I can do it live. So we'll see, Mike. But
Yep.
we have a couple other good topics. Tax preparation is not tax planning.
Right. And H&R Block, for the most part, doesn't do tax planning. Or what's the other one that we use? TurboTax, rather.
Tax cuts and TurboTax are not omniscient. They do a great job if you have a very simplistic, extremely simplistic situation. Boom, it does a great job. You add any complexity to it of any sort, you click the wrong button, you put the wrong check mark in here or there. We just had a client call us the other day, and he said, hey, I'm finding out that my IRA contributions are fully deductible. And we're like, no, they shouldn't be. It can't be. Well, it turned out that there were check boxes that didn't get checked right. And therefore, because, just because TurboTax says it's deductible doesn't mean it is. It just meant that there were other mistakes that have been made, not that it was consciously made. It just, you didn't know.
So for our clients, the message is, if we're not doing your taxes, send your taxes to your advisor before filing them so that we can look for any opportunities for you.
And that's key. Send your tax return to your advisor for that full review of your return. There's no additional cost for that. Please send I want to see your return. I don't want to see it after you file it, because if I see it after you file it, then we got to take time and effort and we got to ask either the former preparer to do it and charge you a fee, or I've got to do it and figure out how to factor that in and so forth. I want to look at it before you do it. Please let us see the return before you file it. A review, it only takes about 10-15 minutes. Should be able to see what might be done, but I can't easily do that after. Also, Mike, if they show me after April 15th and I look at their W-2 and said, if you would have let me see this before April 15th, I could have told you to do this, this, or that. If you look at it after April 15th, it's just past history now.
Yeah.
So
this is a good time of year for folks to be looking at their auto and home policies, right?
Yeah, because especially now, Mike, you're one of your main inflation components has been the cost of auto insurance. Did you know that?
Yeah.
It's a major factor as to why the rate of inflation. Why is car insurance going up so much? Well, guess what? Automobiles are costing more to manufacture.
And the replacement.
And the way they make the cars is becoming much more sophisticated. And therefore, when you have to replace sensors and electronic components and so forth, it's even little accidents can cost thousands of dollars to fix. So you're getting significant increases, and you just have to, consider all the new options to keep your premiums as low as possible. And I think that's extremely important to people.
Yeah, that, and then the other two things of that is, some insurance, not all insurance companies are charging the same rates. There's many insurance companies that you might not know the name of because they don't advertise as much, but that's because they pass on that savings.
Yeah, matter of fact,
Lastly, I just, we always have these things we talk about, Drew, that we say, hey, we talk about this all the time, but people are still not doing it. Umbrella insurance, if you don't know what it is, you don't have it, talk to your advisor about it. It greatly increases your safety and your coverage to protect you and your assets for very, very little premium. And it's very few people, if anyone, that shouldn't have it.
So what it does, Mike, is it basically says if somebody sues you for more than your homeowner's liability or more than your auto liability, they'll throw in another million or 2 million or 5 million or 10 billion, depending on how big an umbrella you have, and try to ward off a personal lawsuit against you. Well, think about it. If you're a client of ours, chances are you've got substantial assets, and you might need this policy. And we're not talking about a lot of money. We're talking about $200 to $500 a year maximum to assure that you're not going to have a liability suit come and trying to grab your personal assets from you,
Right.
because you ran out of the 300 or 500,000 of home insurance, or the 250, 500 auto insurance. Clients worth $1 million, $2, $3, $4, $5, $10 million need this umbrella coverage. And we pretty much have got most of our clients, but there are some clients we just they haven't shown it to us. They haven't talked to us about it. And all those people who are listening that aren't clients of ours, they ought to know about this, and they ought to know why real risk management, somebody who's looking at it without a biased eye and telling you what you really need, is the benefit of having a true professional comprehensive advisor.
Right.
Anyway, homeowners insurance, auto insurance, all should be looked at. I was just looking at a client in Pennsylvania just before I came on this call, and guess what? They needed a significant change in their Pennsylvania auto policy.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're out of time, Mike.
We are.
Right?
Yep.
Right. It's Drew Tignanelli saying God bless.